Brilliant. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Great to hear about all of your experience in Myanmar and Yangon, and with MMT-SOL as well. It's great. Okay, so from Myanmar, we'll move to Thailand. And Kunta, Sawadee Krap, Kunta.
Sawadee Krap. Okay, hello everyone. Okay, and let me introduce myself. My name is Chivin Wattanasin. My students often call me Kruta. Okay, and currently I have been teaching English, okay, for primary students at Anuban Trang School, Trang Primary Educational Service Area Office 1. And normally, I always teach English for students in grade 4. And also, I am the chair of membership Thailand TESOL. Thanks a lot for having me today. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tan. Thank you for sharing your experience down in Trang. I've been to Trang, I think, once or twice.
Yeah,
very
Trang
nice,
is
very nice
in the southern part of Thailand.
Yeah, I love southern Thailand. It's one of my favorite parts of Thailand.
It's very famous for tourism. Yes.
Yes, I was working in Trang actually, but it's many years ago. Anyway, and so without further ado, we've gone from Indonesia to Myanmar to Thailand. So last but definitely not least, Vietnam and Phuong. So xin chào, Phuong.
Yeah, xin chào. So hello everyone. So my name is Trần Thị Thảo Phương, and everybody just call me simply Phương. I have been working as a lecturer and a teacher trainer at the English faculty of Hue University of Foreign Languages and International Study for nearly 17 years, I think. Besides my major as a translator, I am also passionate about teaching English to young learners. Because to me, kids have a very special place. They just like a little bundles of English energy. And I find that there's always something new I can learn from them, right, every day. And related to the research topic, I'm really interested in exploring how teachers and children establish their relationship and interact with each other inside and outside the classroom, how the children develop their social emotional skills, and how to find the best way, the best material to teach them in some certain context. So at university, I have the opportunity to work closely with the English primary school teachers through some training courses like classroom language skills, material of evaluation and adaptation for young learners. And currently, I feel I'm lucky enough to be a part of a tech project. You know, it's a teacher activity groups with the roles as a facilitator. And the project is a kind of collaboration between Hopeflix, ATWS, and Manchester Metropolitan University in UK, with the support from district councils, and focus on individual needs of teachers. And so far, we have provided support to 134 teachers in Thừa Thiên Huế province. So today, I'm very excited, right, to share and to hear and to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phuong. That's great. And yeah, it's nice to hear about your experience on the Teacher Activity Group project from Hue. We've all been very excited to see those projects around Vietnam over the last year and over the last 12 months, and to see where they go in the future as well. So in addition to our panelists, the 4 people you just met, we also have, I can see now we have over 230 people joining us as well, which is fantastic, hopefully from all around our region. So again, I think the chat might be disabled, but certainly if you want, feel free to say where you're from in the Q&A. And if you feel comfortable about that, say which country or which city or province you're from. Hopefully you're all interested in primary teaching, and we're certainly excited to hear about that as well, hear about where you're from, and also to hear your questions. If you've got any comments or questions about what our panelists discussed this afternoon, please feel free to jump in as well. Okay, so for the next 35 minutes, we're going to discuss a couple of questions as a panel, okay, and then hopefully maybe introduce 1 or 2 questions from you as well, from the audience as well. And then in the last 10 or 15 minutes, Elizabeth is going to help us to introduce the course, the classroom management for primary course that is available from the British Council on our Teaching English website at the moment. And then I'll introduce a few ideas, a few more webinars, and a webinar that's actually happening this evening, and then a few more courses as well that are taking place at the moment before we have the final word from our 4 panelists. So that's what we're going to do, and hopefully we'll finish on the hour, or half past the hour in Myanmar, about 15 minutes from now. Okay, so if we get straight into it, and I'll go back again, we'll continue in ASEAN order. So I'll go back to Ika from Indonesia for our first question. So Ika, as a primary teacher, you're all very experienced primary teachers. What challenges do you face in managing your primary classrooms and your primary learners?
Right, thank you, Fide. Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is in managing the classroom is when we have large classes, and I have to make sure that I can give equal attention to every student. So it's quite hard to manage that. For example, if I have around 35 students and then they were asked to work in group, and when they try to present what they have done, I sometimes focus only on one of the groups and I forget about the rest. And I think other students will be very chaotic and noisy because, you know, they actually want to have their, they want to have attention from us as teacher. And maybe because they already finished working on their task and they have nothing to do. So the class becomes chaotic. So I think that is quite challenging, and I need to think how to make sure that I can give equal attention to everybody when I ask them to perform, let's say.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a really good point about the size of classes and managing those classes. Again, I think in most of our countries around our region, the primary teachers and indeed secondary teachers face very similar challenges. Yeah. What about in Myanmar, Elizabeth? What challenges do you have?
Well, there are some challenges in managing a primary classroom. For me, I find it's most challenging to start a lesson on the context they're really interested in, especially like Ika mentioned, and in a large class with lots of students. As soon as I introduce the lesson, my students keep asking questions related to the topic. It is too much talking time, especially for instance, the lesson is about teaching the body parts in the context of monster. And when I start my conversation, I have a monster at home. And then the student asks, teacher, are the monsters real? And another one said, no, they aren't. My mom told me they are not real. And then someone interrupt, I know I have many monster books at home, and so on. So it's difficult for me to move on to another stage. I have to be mindful and also mindful of time and cover all the necessary points. I also have to ensure that every student is engaged and understand the materials. So it is time consuming. My challenge is not a TTT, it is a STT. So I think for primary students, eliciting needs to be more guided by a teacher.
Okay, so when you say TTT and STT, can you explain that? Hopefully everybody knows, but can you explain what you mean by that?
I think instead of reducing teachers talking time, I have to stop STD, like student talking time.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, before we move on to TAR and to FORM, I've got a question here. It's the first question actually. So the same question for you guys in terms of what challenges you face in teaching and managing your primary classrooms, your primary learners. But there's an interesting question here from Marcus Jaided, I think it is. How do you manage the students who are on top of the class? So I think, again, Ika was talking about different levels of students before, sort of when we have mixed ability classes, and so that they feel, and maybe those kind of stronger students feel that they don't need to participate. So maybe that's something to think about as well. Tar, what do you think? How do you manage some of the stronger students who may not feel the need to participate?
Okay, in my opinion, okay, I think I have to use interaction patterns to manage the class. For example, we can set up the activities like pair work, group work, okay, and exactly the stronger students can help, okay, the weaker students, okay. I think it can support, okay, them effectively. Yeah, this is my opinion.
Sure. And I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And another teacher as well, Velma, has said in the chat, in the Q&A, I think in response to Marcus's question, you know, make sure that the students understand the objectives of the lesson as well, and how they will participate. So as you suggested, Tar, getting perhaps some of the stronger students to help some of the weaker ones, can make them feel, oh, they have a role in the classroom as well, to kind of support the teacher and support some of their peers as well. That's a really nice idea. What about you, Fern? What challenges do you have?
Yes, for me, right? Okay, the challenges that I found, and when I just moved to my new schools, and exactly there are a lot of students. It has approximately 40 to 43 students in each class, and the one point that I find, the students, okay, in grade 4 are quite afraid of speaking English, okay, when they have to present in front of the class. And so I try hard to find the solutions to support them. And now I got an ideas about an online edutaining tool called TikTok, okay, and yes, and exactly it's kind of to motivate them in their speaking practice. Yes.
Great, thanks, Dan. So yeah, using TikTok, that's a very you're very up to date with your technology there.
I can say that it's very trendy now.
Yeah, exactly. Even with primary learners, that's a little bit worrying that primary learners can access those things. Fern, before I go to you, the same question about how you manage your primary learners in the classroom, but I've got a couple of questions that I think lead into what you might want to talk about as well. And this is about discipline and behavior. So Raquel asks, how do you manage disruptive students and maybe students with special educational needs? And another teacher has asked, how can we control our students without scolding them, without kind of making them feel they lose some face if they're maybe rude to their friends? So again, what would you say in answer to those questions from your experience of working with primary children here in Vietnam?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, the challenge that honor teacher raised, I feel is quite the same to my situation. Like we have the classroom size with, all right. But related to the question you asked me about how to deal with the learner disability and different learning needs, right? So it happened quite often in Vietnam because you know, and I observe some of the primary classroom, they can be quite diverse in terms of the student ability, the needs, and some class even have a student with special needs, right? With some are very overactive and some is quite exceptional quiet. So this diversity need the teacher to adopt different teaching strategy to cater the individual learning level effectively. I think, for example, with the overactive student, I use that term, right? All right, we need to have some hand-on or movement-based activity for them. For example, some of the kids, they are quite overexcited during that time. I can ask them stand up, go around to collect the paper, just give them some tasks for movement. All right, just they have the feeling that, all right, I'm useful and I can just help the teacher somehow. Or some of the students who are very quiet, right? I just try my best to create a very comfortable and encouragement environment to promote their participation. To some of the students that may be naughty or something, I think most of the time I will not, direct them in the classroom. I will try some other way, like just look at them silently and smile, and check with them like, are you listening to me or something, or just say something after the class. I never just call their name in front of the class and say something.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Phil. Yeah, and it's interesting. There's quite a lot of questions coming in the Q&A from people about some of those issues, about, as you just mentioned, that example of some of the students who perhaps are very weak and a bit quiet, who maybe need a little bit more energy, but also some of the more hyperactive or overactive students, how to settle them, how to calm them down by getting them to use some of their energy, and you just made a couple of suggestions there as well. Again, how the teacher, Shayamali, I need glasses. Shayamali, apologies, Shayamali, if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, asked the question about, children in the class who were super active. How can we as teachers handle them or support them as well? That's a good question. We're going to move on now to another broader question here, which is about how we set up activities in the classroom, or how you set up give instructions effectively to your primary learners. And just before I invite anybody in the group to speak first, so we're not going to go around in order this time. Piai Pyo Ni, I assume from Myanmar, has also asked a question which is related to this topic, and she or he asked, what is the best way to grab students' attention before jumping right into the lesson? So I think that goes back to something Elizabeth was saying earlier about how to set the context, how to get their attention. So maybe Elizabeth, do you want to take that question first and think about how do you set up activities in your classroom?
Yes. So in that case, students' attentions are very important. We have to set up the activity because we want to grab their attention. So our lead-in in lesson plan, lead-in stage is very important. So to get the attention, we have different activities. It's dependent on the lesson plan. Mostly, before I make into group of them, I start playing the music, and the student, they have to go around, walk around in the class. Then I pause the music and I let the student make into group of 4 or 5. Then they have to sit in their own group. So they have to, at that time, they know that what they are going to do now, they are ready, get ready. Then I start giving the instruction about the activity. So when I give the instruction, I have to give also the clear instruction. That's why I used to use CCE. CCE, so our instruction should be concise, clear, and effective. So students, they got attention, and then they can follow our activity. And so we get full attention, and then they know what to do. So our lesson plan has achievement. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And that was a question that's you've kind of touched on a question that came from the Facebook group as well, from the live Facebook live stream, I think it is. So Susan asked, could you tell me, do teachers need to provide lesson outcomes to our primary students at the beginning of the class? What do you think? Again, moving around, anybody can answer that question.
Actually, I totally agree with that. It's also something I often do with my students as well with the teachers who are the trainees in my courses, because I think that kids need to know what they are going to do, why they have to do so, and how to do that. So at the end of the course, when we have some time to recap all the things, they can have the feeling of a kind of achievement. So I can read this kind of targets of the lesson, so they can feel very happy and have a very motivated, right, somehow. And related to the instruction that Elizabeth had just mentioned, I just try to add a little bit, like I also use some of the rule, like, but it's a KISS principle. I mean, it's just short and simple, right? So that I hope that it can ensure the student to easily grab what I expect from them. And Another thing I would like to add is that as the teachers, normally we are so under pressure of time. So as I observe in some classes, like the teacher is very rushed to move from this action to another action, or they very rushed to when they give the answer, they are not patient enough to wait for the learner. Sorry, they give the question, they are not patient enough to wait for the learner answer. So normally I just advise just calm down a little bit and let the student some time to think and figure out the answer, right? It's helped them a lot, I think, right? And also use, I mean, the student native language too. Some people say that as the English teacher, we need to create the best English environment for our kids. But, sometimes with some of the very complicated instruction, complicated expression, if we try to use English, right, to explain, it will waste time and our kids may feel bored and confused. So use Vietnamese or native language at this time is quite suitable. And also, I have to say, action speak louder than words, right? So demonstrating is more effective than just giving a long explanation is what
okay. So yeah, so modeling, demonstrating, and then maybe asking 1 or 2 questions to check that they understand in either in English or in a language that they understand. Yeah, it's interesting that you just mentioned that point about the language. We were talking before, Ika, in Indonesia, you have, in Vietnam, we just have kind of Vietnamese and English, more or less. But in Thailand, in Myanmar, and certainly in Indonesia, you have more than 2 languages. How do you deal with that in your context when giving instructions and setting up activities? What would your advice be?
Yeah, so many kids in Indonesia, when they enter a primary school, they actually have to deal with new languages, even our national languages, national language, Bahasa Indonesia. So many kids, they speak their local language. So it's quite hard for them to make some transition because the instruction is delivered in our national language. And then we also have English. So at the same time that the kids should deal with different kind of languages. So what I would suggest to teachers in primary school, or when I teach in primary school, we can use the combination of those languages, even though maybe in the past there are some people who argue the importance of English only policy in English lessons, but I don't think it is applicable, especially with very limited lesson, limited teaching hours, like in Indonesia, for example, only an hour a week. So when the teacher keeps speaking in English, the kids will not understand. And actually, the teachers themselves in Indonesia, many of them are also still struggling in using English in the classroom, because when we speak English to children, we also need to make sure that the language that we use, the level of difficulty, it should be also adjusted to the student's level. So, for example, in giving instruction or establishing routine at the beginning, we can use the mix of the language, or when we prepare our students to listen to a story in English, I might introduce some keywords in the story using the words in their local language, so they can understand what kind of story that they are going to listen and how they can participate in the story. So, for example, I will just tell them some action words in the students' local language, and I said, if you hear run or lumpat, yeah, and then I will do the action. When you hear the word run, you also have to do the action, but they know what it means from the meaning in the language that they understand. But I also use gesture. But of course, in the story, when I tell it in English, I did not need to use the local language anymore, because I use that as the preparation to prepare them to anticipate what is coming. Yeah, so during the modeling, the students will listen most to the English version of the story.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And Tara, you're gonna add to that?
Yep. Let me share, okay, my techniques, okay, how to manage my classrooms. And then exactly, I do agree with Ika, okay, and as I am a language primary teacher, okay, but I rarely consider all the following things to make my classroom more effective, okay. First, okay, body language, okay, or gestures, okay, we can like make them easily understand how to do the activities. Or but I can say that, okay, teacher can speak in short sentences with pauses and show them what to do, or we can call demonstration, and encourage them to finish the sentences, or we can call eliciting, right? And the second, student repeat. Yes, this is a good way to keep them listening and thinking as teacher giving instructions. It also helps them remember what they hear, shows teachers that they understand or don't, and can be done quickly. And third, ask simple questions, okay, as David, okay, you said earlier, okay, about, okay, ICQ, okay, instruction checking questions, okay, it can be useful or helpful, okay, to check student understanding. And the last, teachers should not stay in one place. Teachers should move around the classroom, listen and watch, okay, and this is called monitoring. Yes, this is my idea.
Brilliant, thanks, Ty. Yes, a great little summary there of some of the things we should do as teachers in all classes, but especially with primary learners, in terms of setting up the activities, getting people's attention. Somebody was asking in the chat about how to grab our students' attention. Elizabeth gave us 1 or 2 ideas before, and then Fuang mentioned, I think, about demonstrating the activities. And then maybe, as you said, Ta, asking a few eliciting, instruction checking questions in English or in the local language. It doesn't have to always be in English, just to check that they understand what they have to do. And then when they're away they go and they're doing the activity, yeah, then hopefully the teacher is not sitting at the front at her desk or on her phone, but actually moving around, monitoring the students, listening to the students, helping and supporting the students where necessary. And that's a really nice little checklist for all of us, I think. A little reminder for all of us to think about how to deal with setting up classes and setting up activities effectively. There's lots of questions coming in. but I'm mindful of the time, so apologies if I'm motoring through. Got another question here for our panel, and again, anybody can jump in first, which is about the types of activities, the range of activities that you like to use with your learners to keep the classroom motivated, to keep it dynamic. And Pacharang Kuna, which I think is Rabbit from Thailand, if I remember rightly, I think that's you, Rabbit, asks, can you, the panelists, suggest some activities to use in mixed ability classes as well? We talked before about having stronger, weaker, average students mixed in a class. So that's a second question for some of you there. Who'd like to go first?
Okay, me. Okay.
Oh, okay, Tom.
I will go first. Okay. I often, okay, use the ways of the different interaction pattern that I said earlier, okay, in class, okay. And for example, individual work, okay, the student can spend their time completing the tasks, okay, by their own ability, or like a pair work, okay, but they can think, pair, share, okay, like to empower their thoughts and confidence. And exactly, and the last thing, group work or mingles activities. They can present their work in collaboration with their teamwork. Okay, and finally, I think it's very important, monitoring. Monitoring is also very important for teacher. Teacher can walk around the classroom to listen to and watch the student need. Yes, this is my idea.
Yeah, some very nice activities there. Thanks, Tar. With the mingle activity, is it easy to do a mingle activity in some of our classrooms? Again, Ika, I can see you shaking your head there.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. The kids will love it. but it's quite hard to manage. So what I would do is that I need, again, preparation stage is very important. So before we jump into the action, I will set up some routines for the kids. So it's very important for us to let them know when they can start the activity and when they stop, because once they're mingling, it will be very noisy. So what I would do, I would say, if you see me doing this, yeah, and then if I have my hands like this, everybody should do the same, and then nobody make noise, yeah, something like that. Or if I can also say, if I say, here comes the wolf, and then I will say, ow, and everybody can do the same, all of them, and then going down, and then everybody is silent. So it's just, we need to have lots of tools to get their attention, and we need to prepare that before we do the activity, because if we just jump into the activity, it will be chaotic. It's hard for us to stop them, and then just like Elizabeth mentioned earlier, then it's hard for us to get to the next activity, because everybody is just drawn into that one. Yeah.
Thanks, Ika. Yeah, there were a few questions about attention grabbers or getting the students' attention, and Elizabeth did touch on it earlier. And I think that you made a really good point there, Ika, as well, about we need to make sure we get their attention, not just before we give instructions or before we demonstrate an activity, but also how we're going to stop an activity, how we're going to pause an activity, so that the students know what to expect. Again, it goes back to what someone mentioned earlier about routines, introducing certain routines into the classroom, that especially primary learners, they really like routines. They like to repeat the same ideas, the same language, the same activities, some variety as well. I think Tal was talking before about varying the activities and varying the interaction patterns, sure, but also thinking about the use of routines, how they can help us. Tal, you can sort of challenge the idea of the mingle. How do you manage a mingle activity in a classroom in Trang? Oh,
for me, right? Yeah. Yes. Okay. I can hear. Okay. And how to set up, okay, like mingles activities, okay, but we have to set up, okay, like the questions, okay, and when we gonna deliver the instructions, okay, we have to use like KISS, or keep it short and simple, okay, and exactly when we deliver, okay, these instructions for the young learners, and then we can use like ICQ to check their understanding about, okay, how are we going to do this activity together, and then so
okay.
And I think the most important thing, like we have to demonstrate, okay, how to do this activity. Yes, okay, I think like this is all the process, how to check, okay, student understanding.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and in a minute we'll come back to my question about how to make best use of the classroom space, because I think that's quite interesting, especially when we have kind of standard classrooms, very kind of traditional classrooms in our part of the world. But let's stay with the types of activities, the range of activities that you use with your primary learners. Elizabeth, what about you? What kind of types of activities do you like to use with your students in Yangon?
Yes, whenever I introduce my student to a specific language, I normally play a fly swat game. And fly swat game is a game for building speed and confidence with identifying sight words. That's why I like that game very much, that activity very much. If there are 20 students in the class, I divide it into 4 groups, and then each student, they have to come out and play. They have to take turn. At the time, they have to also nominate their friends from the other group, and then when I say a word, they have to slap the correct word on the board with a fly swat. It's a great way of giving our learners the repetition that you said. You have mentioned that they like to repeat, and then the repetition, and they need to achieve mastery while keeping them engaged. So that is also important stage. They are very active, energetic because of that activity. They listen at the same time, and they hit the correct word and then that game is very useful for me. So I use that
Okay.
one. And on the other hand, if we have to deal with a large class, we have to consider for that as well. In such case, teachers, they have to prepare, like I prepare 10 set of flashcards and put them on the table, and then I let them sit in their group. And then when I say a word, and they have to grab the cards correctly, or they have to touch. So this is a fun way of doing the activity for a large class. So students, they enjoy learning by doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that idea about getting the students to learn by doing. That's fantastic, Elizabeth. Florian, any other activities you'd add to what Tar, Ika, and Elizabeth have shared?
I just add a little bit about give some tips for the classroom layouts that I often use. Like, you know, in Vietnam, some of the primary classroom are organized in the traditional way. We have 4 rows, right? All right, with 2 kids sit on the same table. So with the activity you like that you mentioned, like mingle or something like that, I think that a lot of teachers in Vietnam, they don't like it. I think, just what I think, because when I suggest
why don't they like it, for?
Because, you know, right, first of all, right, it's quite difficult for the teacher to manage. If they want to do that, the kids need to stand up, go around, ask questions. So, you know, it's a quite, right, the noise is really a big problem, right? If they want to make, it's a crowded classroom, right? So if they want their friend to listen to them, they have to shout it out. So a lot of noise like that may affect to the other classes, because they all of the class are settled, right, next to each other. Right, so it's quite difficult for the teacher to manage everything. And also, right, the kids sometimes may be overactive after that. So the teacher also needs some time to calm them down. All right, and I think with just 35 minutes to manage everything like that, it's quite hard for them, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so normally the teacher, I asked a lot of teachers, primary school teachers, and they said that they prefer the pair work and the group work. And the way they pair the student is that 2 students sit in the same table will be pair, right, to work to each other. Or maybe the students sit in the front can turn around and talk to the people sit behind them. And I think that it might work for them because it can save the time. However, I think it's quite boring sometimes to talk with the same people most of the time. So I often suggest them, right? Why don't you try a little bit, mix it up, right? Sometimes, but not always, right? Depend on the activity, right? Mix the student up together so that they can have a more chance to communicate with each other.
Okay,
or sometimes we can be creative, just go out.
Yeah, so it'd be great to hear from the others, from Elizabeth, Ika, and Tar. Yeah, how do you mix it up in terms of, if you can't move the furniture, if you can't vary the physical space, how can you make best use of the classroom space so that your students do enjoy the activities, going back to what Fleur was saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay, me.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, how do I make best use of the classroom space? Okay, and for this point, okay, but I often use, okay, the personalized spaces, okay, like to provide opportunities, okay, for students to personalize, okay, their workspace within the classroom. And I think this can create a sense of ownership and motivation. And then finally, display student work, okay, but to dedicate, okay, space to showcase, right, and students' work, achievement, and project. And I think this can create a sense of pride and motivation among students. Okay, I think it's like how to make best use of the classroom.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Tar. Yeah, so that's a nice idea, actually. In some classrooms, in some schools, it's not always easy to do that. Some principals don't like that. So, but again, it depends on the school. It depends on the principal. But it's great. I love the idea of personalizing classrooms if we can. Elizabeth, any other ideas that you have for making best use of your classroom space in Yangon?
Well, in our school, we create the space depending on the size of the class, the size of the group, and then the type of activity and the style of furniture. So for me, I prefer cafe style seating. So the students, they can see what is going on in front of the class clearly, and also they are in a position to change pair walk or group walk. And also at the same time, I can monitor each small group to ensure the activity is productive or not. So for mingle activity.
Elizabeth, sorry,
yes.
sorry, just to interrupt. When you say cafe style seating, do you mean sitting like in small groups in the round?
Yes, yes, maybe
Okay,
in 4 in a table or 6 in a table.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes.
And what about you, Ika, in Indonesia? Is that feasible? Is that possible? Or how do you try to make best use of the classroom space?
Yeah, our situation is more similar to what Phương explained in Vietnam. So we also have 4 rows and like that. So when we ask the students to work in group, usually like in a group of 4, so we can ask the students just turn around their chair. So it will be more convenient and save more time. But perhaps you can also have alternative, still working in group of 4, but we can have a mix. We can ask the students from other row to move, and then they can have different people in one group. So that's maybe one of the ways to cope with limited space in the class, but they still can mingle.
Yeah, thanks, Ika. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, because again, I really like what Tara suggested before in terms of a mingle activity, and students of all ages love mingle activities, but as Phương rightly said, it can get a little bit noisy. And it can be difficult when you've got furniture in fixed rows, which we often have in Vietnam and Indonesia for sure, and in other countries as well in our region. But yeah, we can be flexible, we can be creative and think about different ways to kind of recreate that atmosphere and still allow the children to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of flexibility. If we just just be a little bit creative in our approaches, I guess, without fundamentally changing everything and without disturbing our neighbors, the teachers in the next door classrooms too much, which is often a complaint, certainly here in Vietnam. Thanks everyone, some fascinating experiences and ideas and techniques that you shared. And before we finish, I'm going to come back to all of you and ask you one final question. So I'll set the question now, and then I'll come back to you in about 5 minutes time, just before we finish. So my final question is, I'd like each of you to give our audience, we have over 300 people, almost 315 people at one point on the webinar this afternoon, one top tip from each of you in terms of how you manage your primary classrooms. What would be your one top tip to take away? So just think about everything we've discussed today over the last half hour, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So I'll come back to you in a few minutes. So thanks for now. I'll come back to you in just about 5 minutes. What we're going to do now is, and before I ask the final question, is to, there's lots of comments in the chat now. The chat's open. Oh, sorry, everybody, I didn't see the chat. Lots of questions, so many questions. I wish we had more time to deal with all of your questions, but apologies for that. So we've chosen this topic this month, classroom management for primary, because we have a course that is available on the Teaching English website, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. So what we're going to do now is, Elizabeth, in just a moment, and hopefully my colleague Deanne is going to show you the next slide where you can see, so there you go. So you can see, it's gone a bit funny there. I don't know why it's gone funny. You can see there, this is what the course looks like. Okay, I don't know why the typing has all gone funny. But anyway, Elizabeth is going to demonstrate how we can enroll on the course. So Elizabeth, if you can, if I can hand over to you, if we stop sharing our screen, and Elizabeth, you're going to take us through how to enroll on the course. Yeah, thanks.
Now, yes. Can you see my share screen?
I think it's coming. Yeah, we can see now. Brilliant.
Yes.
So if one of my colleagues can put the link in the chat, that
Yes.
would be great. So everyone can see the link. So what do you have to do to log on to the
First,
course?
yes. If you have already logged into your account, and we have to go to step 2, enroll on your course, and then click or tap the button below. You have to click this one.
Okay. Ooh.
And excuse me.
No problem.
It's asking for me password. Reset your password.
Okay. So for teaching English, yeah. So remember, you can all access the Teaching English website free of charge. But if you want to join one of the courses, you have to register. So first of all, so Elizabeth, I think over the weekend you registered, yeah, on Teaching English.
Yes, I
is that
have
right?
already registered. Yes.
All right, brilliant. So can you share your screen again and show us how to or is it not allowing you to do that?
What's the problem?
Don't worry. If you're having a problem, it means other people will have a similar problem. So that's why it's good to work this out. Okay, yeah. Oh, it's asking you to reset the password. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's strange, isn't it? Okay. Oh well, never mind. Don't worry. We tried anyway. But if you can stop sharing, that's okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. So as I say, if I can just share my screen, just bear with me a second. Hopefully, we tried to show you, but hopefully you can work it out yourselves how to log on. And as I say, as Elizabeth showed you, there are 2 steps. Oops, bear with me a second. Voila. So yeah, first, what you need to do is log on, make sure you've got your own account as on Teaching English, and then you can enroll on the course. And you can see there the course, I think my colleague has already put the link in the chat if you're interested in learning more about this topic, because I can see so many questions and so many comments coming through the chat, and I'm really sorry that we just haven't had time to address all of them in our very short webinar today. But I hope that the course will really help you to understand that. Just to let you know as well, before I go back to our panelists, if you look on the screen, if you've got your phone there, you can look at you can take a photograph of the QR code on the left-hand side, and you can find out about other activities, other courses, lesson plans, webinars that are taking place in August. So if you've got your phone, please use the QR code and you can learn about lots more activities, including signing up for our newsletter. In about an hour's time at 6 o'clock in Indonesia, Thailand and Vietnam, and at 5:30 in Myanmar, there's a webinar for teacher educators. For those of you who are interested in making the move from teacher to teacher educator, there's a webinar that's taking place. So again, you can see the details there, looking at developing skills to enhance your career as a teacher educator. So you can join that in just about an hour's time. And Fern mentioned before about teacher activity groups. She was talking about the teacher activity groups that she's been involved in Hue in central Vietnam. So you can learn about teacher activity groups or about communities of practice for teachers. You can learn about that through that webinar in an hour. Also, 2 other courses that are taking place this month that might be of interest for you. One is on safeguarding learners, and the other is on how to teach pronunciation. So again, some really useful information, some really useful resources for you on the Teaching English website. And just one thing to say very briefly before I hand back to our panel. In October, we're going to have a conference for teachers across ASEAN. Starting on World Teachers Day, the 5th of October, we'll be looking at the theme of taking responsibility for your professional development. And this conference will take place from the 5th all the way through to the 27th of October with teachers and educators from across our region, from Indonesia, from Myanmar, from Thailand, from Vietnam, and also from the UK and other countries as well. So in our next webinar in September, we're going to share a little bit more about the conference and what you can expect to see. Okay, so before, very important as well, I said at the very beginning, please, again, please, if you take one picture this afternoon, please take a picture with your camera of the QR code here, or one of my colleagues will put the link in the chat for you. Please give us your feedback on today's webinar, and then you can download your e-certificate. I know you all would like to have your certificate after today's webinar. Okay, it's a very quick run through. I'm going to stop sharing, and to finish, I'm going to go back to my panelists. Okay, we've got 3 more minutes before we finish. Your top tip for classroom management for primary. Who'd like to go first?
Okay, let me go
straight in there. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. One of the best tips that I use to manage the classroom effectively. Okay. To build relationship, right? And we can establish positive relationships with our students. When students feel sense of connections and respect with their teachers, they are more likely to want to participate and follow classroom routines. Yes, this is my top tips. Okay.
So do you mean that it's about building the relationship between you as a teacher and your learners, and amongst the learners themselves as well? They feel it's a fun space and a safe space. Is that right?
Yeah,
that's
right.
Tar. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Tar, would you like to nominate somebody? Who would you like to hear from next?
Okay. Could you please, Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to say for today's topic, I have one topic that is make your students memorable learning and create a warm atmosphere. So because I met with one of my students from kindergarten a year ago, and he told me that he remembered I prepared a magic box in the class and put a thing in it. And for example, maybe a toy robot inside a magic box, which was related with today's topic. And then the student said that he couldn't think of what were teacher's book inside for the lesson. He couldn't stop thinking about that one. So he wanted to go school in the morning very early so that he can check earlier than the other students. So those days were unforgettable days for him. And then I was really glad to hear that. So creating a warm atmosphere is very important also, I think. So students, they can have trust on us, and they say their feeling. So this is very important, I think. So
thank you, Elizabeth.
Memorable learning and create a warm atmosphere.
Okay, thank you very much. And Elizabeth, who would you like to hear from next, Phuong or Ika?
Ika, please.
All right, thank you. So my tip is that don't be afraid to experiment using different kind of activities or routines or attention grabber when you manage your class, because one activity might work very well in one class, but it's a total disaster in another one. And do not forget to always engage your students. You can always invite your students to invent activities that you can do to manage the class. I think it can build the sense of ownership among them.
Yeah, I love that idea. Thanks, Ika. Again, Tar mentioned that sense of ownership earlier as well.
Yes.
Even though our primary learners are very young, it doesn't mean that they don't have their own ideas and they want that sense of ownership. And that's a really nice idea. Thanks, Ika. Last but not least, for
So my tip is just very simple, like just spread your praise generously to your student. You know, celebrate the kids even with the very small accomplishment, so they can feel more confident. And then it's a kind of acknowledge their efforts, so that we can promote their self-assurance and motivation with our lessons. This is what I often do. Yeah.
So I think if I can summarize, there's a really nice, all 4 tips there. There's one thread, which is about creating that environment, creating a positive environment, creating a safe space, a warm space for the learners, building those relationships, building those routines, and praising the students for all their contributions, acknowledging those. There's kind of a definite common thread there, which is lovely. And I definitely agree with all of those. Right, we're past the hour, or past half hour in Myanmar, so time to wrap up, I'm afraid. But I can't go without saying thanks very much to all our panelists today for sharing their experience and their techniques. So thank you to Elizabeth, to Ika, to Tar, and to Phuong from around our region. Really appreciate your time and all your sharing this afternoon. And thanks to all of you. There's still 300 of you on the call, which is brilliant. Thanks for all your comments. Again, I can only apologize we didn't have time to address all your comments and questions, but I hope that you'll enroll on the course to learn even more. Okay, and we look forward to seeing you in September, when we'll tell you more about our online conference in October. Okay, so with that, I'll say thank you very much to everybody, and have a great afternoon, have a great evening. Don't forget, there's another webinar at 6 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. See you next time. Bye for now.